Hello and welcome everyone to Immigration and Talk Show. I'm Nipasa Pradhan. And before we proceed with today's topic and our guest, well, I wanted to give out this very important information, and that is by watching our videos, you agree and understand that the information provided by our experts and attorneys, including comments and replies from users, is not legal advice. So, use of information is totally at your own risk. Well, once again, a very warm welcome to everyone. Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you have joined us from. Thank you so much for joining us today. Well, we are streaming live on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Nipasa Pradhan, and I'm thrilled, to be here today after I think I was here last week, so very happy to be here once again. And there's this episode lined up, and today we are going to focus on a topic that was actually covered by my colleague last week. With this very special guest who's going to join us again today, and he is none other than expert immigration attorney Prashant Dubey. Thank you so much once again, Prashant, for joining us.
Yep. Thank you, Nipasa. Thank you to the higher IT team. Thanks, Zayed, for all you do in the background. Excited to be here. I know last week we had covered round one of the EB1A topic, and I think we were only able to get through 5 questions, right? And it related to
Right.
some of the high level updates, changes in policies within the EB1A world, processes associated with the EB1A application, criteria associated with the EB1A qualifications, and typically where I see my clients, especially within the information technology sector, in terms of where they qualify. And then we took questions from the audience, and we were out of time. So happy to be back for round two of this topic, and to go down the rabbit hole a little bit deeper when it comes to the EB1A.
Absolutely. We are definitely going to dive deeper today with this topic, friends, because we have so much to cover. And I'm sure you too have questions. So, wherever you're watching us from, don't forget to tell us where you have joined us from. Maybe your name, your city or state would also be great to know. So, ask your questions, and we would be very happy to take them in today's show. So, we're going to be here for an hour. Stay with us and let's get into it. I mean, Prashant, last week you touched a little bit on this topic. So, building a profile to qualify for the EB1A category as it as an IT professional. So, would you like to maybe just give us this, short gist of what we covered last week, and let's go ahead with today's episode.
Yeah, yeah. So I think this episode or this series we're doing with the EB1A is really important, right? Especially because traditionally there was a lot of misconception in terms of who qualifies for an EB1A. So when you look at the criteria, sometimes you will see things like, you have to review conference papers and journals, you need to be, published in journals, you need to maybe achieve a certain level of an award or a reward for the work you've done. And a lot of individuals, especially within IT, they would shy away from considering the EB1A process, right? I think that's changing, especially over the last year. One of the trends that I've noticed is that because of all of the retrogressions in the EB2 and EB3 categories, where the dates moved up to 2014 for a couple of years, and then they retrogressed back to 2012. A lot of people are feeling that the dream of getting a green card, obtaining a permanent residency within the U.S. is really getting farther and farther out of hand, right? And so many IT professionals over the last year have approached me to understand whether or not their profile qualifies for an EB1A. And sometimes during that intake process, we find individuals that do, in fact, satisfy the criteria for the EB1A. Other times, we find individuals that, maybe you don't satisfy the criteria, but we like to lay out a roadmap for them in terms of how they can qualify for it, right? Because if you're waiting in the EB2, EB3 categories, it might take you 20, 30 years before you have your green card in hand, right? Like if you have a US citizen child, they're probably going to sponsor you first for a green card before you get it through EB2 or EB3. So the clients that have successfully, done this through our firm, they're cutting decades out of their green card processing. Um, and I have developed a niche over the last year catering to IT professionals and clients. I did have one client that was a dentist, but I would say 99% of my clients are software engineers, security engineers, product managers, software developers, folks within IT that are driving really good outcomes, for their employers and doing really innovative work in the industry. And so a lot of the information we covered last week was around, what are some of the changes that have recently happened, right? So um, in February, they increased the fees as it related to premium processing. It went from 2,500 to 2,805. On April 1st, just this month, they increased the fees for the I-140 application, right? So it went from 700 to $715. And then they also introduced what's called an asylum program fee. That asylum program fee is $300. So a brand new fee that they've introduced for applicants with that are filing the I-140 application under the EB-1A category. In addition to that, about 6 months ago, there were changes in USCIS's policy manual as it related to the EB1A criteria. So USCIS started issuing clarifying guidance in terms of, hey, we've laid out these 10 criteria. Here is how we feel like folks should be satisfying them, right? You only need to satisfy three of the criteria out of the 10. So keep that in mind because that's very important when developing, an EB1A profile. But they issued clarifying guidance, which never happened before. They did make some requirements a little bit more strict. So, for example, there's a criteria asking about whether you have judged or reviewed the work of others. And in the past, for IT clients, we would say, well, they have employees or direct reports that are reporting up to them. They're reviewing their work, right? They're making hiring and firing decisions, they're doing performance reviews. And we would claim that category, that criteria based on that work. And USCIS in September, they basically said, look, that doesn't count, right? That is a part of your day to day job. That is not going above and beyond and rising to the level of an extraordinary ability. So that requirement got a little bit more strict. And in other areas, it was good to see that there was clarification in terms of how maybe somebody can satisfy the criteria of whether their work has been critical, whether their work has been innovative, right? What counts as a publication, what counts as a high salary. So it was a welcome sort of guidance from USCIS. In addition to that, we also talked about what those criteria are, right? Especially within the context of information technology, right? Because I think for all of my IT clients, I find them, they typically fall in 3 to 4 different criteria buckets. Um, and I know there's folks out there that try to claim like 7 criteria, but I'll be honest, that just annoys a USCIS officer, right? So I never file claiming 7 criteria. I think at most I've done 6, but we built a sound argument around each one. So where I typically see the 3 or 4 is, has your work been critical for the organizations you've worked for? And that means what kind of ROI, what kind of business outcome, what kind of cost savings did you deliver for your organization? I think across the board, my IT clients satisfy this criteria. The second one is salary. Oftentimes, I get software developers, machine learning engineers, data modeling experts, software engineers who are earning over $200,000, right?
Mhm.
And it's a very objective criteria in the sense that all we need are your recent W-2s, recent pay stubs, maybe an employment verification letter to prove that you are, in fact, in the top 10% of earners in the US within your specific field. The third one is innovation, right? So, how has your work been innovative or influenced the industry? And we typically like to show that through, obtaining patents, or perhaps you've been invited to speaking engagements, right? So I've had clients who get invited to industry-wide conferences such as AWS reInvent, which is a really big cloud conference that happens annually. And they talk about the work they've done, right? They're invited to do that because their work is innovative. Some clients have patents, and those patents have actually been cited by industry like tech giants like Apple, Google, Amazon, right? So that's how we can show that you've influenced the industry. Um, and then the fourth criteria I often see is, have you been a judge or reviewing the work of others? So that can be reviewing conference papers. But most of the time, what I see with IT folks is being able to do like architecture reviews, performance reviews for other organizations within the industry. And I'll give you an example. I had a client who successfully did an EB1A, and he is a cloud insurance product manager. And basically, he went to an organization in the industry and he said, "Hey, I see that you are implementing solutions within this field, this cloud insurance field that I'm working in, right? And can I do a performance review and create an assessment report for you? Looking at your code, looking at your architecture, is it well architected? Is it cost optimized? Is it set up properly for security?" And I'll, create an assessment report and I'll hand that over to you as a work product, right? So that's typically how I see my IT clients satisfy that requirement. Um, Sometimes we get a number five and a number six, right? And that number five and number six is usually, are you a member of organizations that demand outstanding achievement of their members, right? Um, and so I've had a few clients who've obtained certifications like a CISSP, right? Only 90,000 people in the US have that, or even a CFA, right? A CFA is very difficult to achieve. So, by way of certain certifications or memberships in certain organizations like the British Computer Society, we're able to show that they are, in fact, a member of an organization that demands, outstanding achievement from individuals that are applying to them. And then the sixth one, I typically see this with clients of mine that have done like a master's degree in the US. They might have done some research work, right? Or they might have gotten published in a few journals. And we're able to claim that six criteria. But oftentimes I would say like those first four is really where I see my IT clients fall. And then if we have a number five and a number six, that's even better.
Perfect. Thank you so much for summarizing what we covered last week, Prashant. And for folks out there who have joined us, this is none other than immigration attorney Prashant Dubey, a renowned expert in immigration law with years of experience. So he has been helping individuals navigate the complexities of the US immigration system. So thank you so much once again, Prashant, for joining us. And friends out there, thank you also for joining us. I can already see so many questions. So let me just greet you all. And I would say stay with us because we are going to take up your questions. All right. So a LinkedIn user, Anonymous, says, join from Wisconsin. Thank you for joining. And then on YouTube, Raya, well, hello to Raya, to Tarun, and on LinkedIn, Dr. Atif Ali saying it's interesting. Thank you so much. And Nancy, thank you for asking your questions. We will sure take them up. But for now, stay with us. All right. So, Prashant, I think we should just dive into the questions I got for you today. All right.
Yeah.
So, let's go ahead with this first one. And that is, what are the best practices for documenting and presenting evidence of extraordinary ability, well, such as awards, recognition, and even media coverage? And how can someone ensure that this evidence is properly contextualized, and highlighted in the petition?
Yeah, yeah. So I always like to talk about this through the context of the criteria itself, right? Because that's how it's most relevant. Um, I think when you are preparing documentation, when you're presenting evidence, you need to be highly organized, right? And it's important to layer on sometimes two to three different pieces of evidence per criteria. So for example, when I work with clients, I always tell them, hey, identify the top 3 to 5 projects that you've worked on in your career, right? Because we're going to need to show why it was critical and why it was innovative and why it was potentially innovative for the industry. And as you're going through this exercise, lay out, what specific contributions did you have on this project? What outcomes did you deliver? What technical tasks did you perform, right? Document it out, right? And we like to call that a progressive development document. Talk about the most impactful projects in your career, um, identify what you did, who you worked with, and also identify who your recommenders are going to be, right? Because in addition to that document, we're going to need people who you've worked with. Maybe it's a manager, maybe it's a peer. We're going to need people to be able to sign off on recommendation letters talking about the work you've done, right? So we now have the progressive development document. We've got the recommendation letters. And the third thing I typically like to have are any specific work products, right? These can be design diagrams, architecture diagrams. This can be code you've developed, for example. Work products about your contribution, right? That you might have authored. Maybe it's a white paper. Maybe it's something you sent out in an email, right? Nothing is too small. But for that criticality and innovation criteria, we definitely need to have recommendation letters. We need to have project documentation, and we need to have work products attesting to what you've done and tying you to those projects, right? So I think layering on multiple exhibits per criteria is extremely important. Um, for other criteria like memberships, right? And I'll talk about the individual that had the CISSP certification or the CFA certification, right? This my guy with the CISSP, he's a security engineer. And we made the argument that, hey, obtaining this CISSP qualifies him for the membership criteria, right? So I did research on the CISSP, right? What does it take to obtain it? What are the statistics around it? How many people have it? How many years of work experience? I think it was 8 years of work experience minimum in a very specific set of cybersecurity domains that it takes to, even sit for that exam, right? And so some for this criteria it requires a lot of outside research in addition to the fact that we need to show your certification itself as an exhibit. Um, and we did the same thing for my data engineer, or sorry, my data product manager who had the CFA. We took the bylaws from the CFA certification, who's making decisions on the individuals that are going to obtain a CFA, right? What are their profiles? How do you obtain the CFA? What does it take? I think it takes like 2,000 hours of study, right? So these are certifications that once you get them, I mean, you've really accomplished something within your field. And we're able to make that argument through these different exhibits, through these different documentations. For the judging criteria, right? For clients who do, performance testing, architecture reviews, product implementation reviews, for other organizations outside of their employer, what we do is we draft letters from those organizations, and we also layer on the work product that they created, right? Or the assessment report that they created. So you now have maybe a CEO or a CTO of a company saying, yes, this person's expertise was beneficial in improving my product, or my application or my tool or my software, and this is how they went about doing it. All of that gets outlined in the letter, and then we've also got the work product itself. So I think for each of the criteria, making sure you have multiple exhibits to satisfy the criteria is extremely important. The way you organize these exhibits is also very important, right? It's always good to have an index of your exhibits. For each exhibit number, you want to describe what the exhibit is. So, for example, my exhibit one always starts with the client's resume, right? And so when the page says exhibit one in parentheses, it also says resume of name of client, right? So you want to describe it because, honestly, in an EB1A application package, we're sending out like 700 pages worth of documentation. It's very easy for a USCIS officer to get lost in that, right? So you want to make it as easy as possible for them to absorb all of this information, right? Um, that you're giving to them in this EB1A brief, which is like a 25, 30-page document in and of itself that talks
Mhm.
about how an individual satisfies the criteria. But then also, your 400, 500 pages of exhibits need to be properly indexed, need to be properly labeled so that it's easy for the officer to read it.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for taking that out. But yes, and for clarifying so many things, I'm sure folks out there, it's pretty clear how Prashant has explained. And if you have more questions, just keep them dropping. We are going to take them up. I'll just say hi to Akash Cha on LinkedIn. And also, another LinkedIn user has a question. We will take them up. Please stay with us. And on YouTube, Avyan has also joined us. Thank you so much for your question. Just stay with us. We are surely going to take them. So, Prashant, let's just move on to the next question so that we can take up our viewers' questions a little quickly today. So, if you can discuss, the importance of establishing a clear and robust nexus between extraordinary ability and the benefit of the United States, and how can someone effectively demonstrate, this in the petition, which is very important.
Yeah, yeah. So, an EB1A brief typically starts with an introduction of the client's profile. This is their work history. Here's all the awesome projects they've worked on. And typically, I see that my clients also happen to have graduated from high ranking universities, right? So that's another thing we talk about. And the third thing we talk about in that introductory portion is how they are receiving renown in the industry, right? Maybe they've done something newsworthy that's been talked about. Maybe they've been published in some sort of newspaper, like the Tech Times, USA Today, International Business Times, that sort of thing. And then we get into the criteria, right? We usually have 4 or 5 sections dedicated just to the criteria analysis. And then the conclusion is the third section is an analysis of why this individual is going to be beneficial to the US. I typically like to start this section off by talking about the growth trajectory of the profession, right, over the next 10 years. This is information you can get from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right? So if I type in software developers, BLS, Google search, right, it will give me growth projections of, the next 10 years that this profession is expected to grow by 10, 20, 30%. That's important, right? Because if it's expected to grow by that much, that means you also need the talent to fill that gap, right? And this is that talent. Then I talk about high level how maybe the government, the US government, or the current presidential administration is pushing certain initiatives forward. So, for example, I've had clients with security backgrounds, and it's very easy to tie those backgrounds to certain cybersecurity initiatives that the Biden administration is pushing. I've had a client who is a wireless network technology product manager. That's a mouthful, but he is enhancing. So like when you go to an airport, when you go to a stadium, and you get hooked up to the internet, he's working on that underlying technology that is connecting your phone, your tablet, your laptop to the network system in these large venues, right? So those, networking initiatives are also important to the US government. So that's another thing we like to outline. And then if there's any emerging trends, for example, I like to get articles related to it, typically from Gartner. So, for example, I would say 90% of my clients are working in some way, shape, or form with cloud technologies. So, I had a client from Facebook who was setting up data centers for them so that the data center could actually facilitate, Facebook, or now they're called Meta, but Meta's machine learning, generative AI capabilities and initiatives, right? These are all hot topics within IT and within cloud computing. And it's very easy to find articles explaining how these technologies are very novel, very new, how they're going to continue to be in demand really in all industries, right? So that's how we explain that this individual skill set is so important to the US. We connect it to the growth trajectory, we connect it to potential government initiatives, and we connect it to emerging technologies and trends that are happening in the industry to show that this is an individual that's deserving of a green card so that he can continue or she can continue making their contributions here in the US.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for explaining that for us again, Prashant. Lovely to get your answers. Very enlightening. I hope folks out there are following us. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button too, friends, so that you can always join us when we have these important discussions all about immigration and jobs and visas, of course. So, well, Prashant, let's move on to this next question I got for you. And that is, what are the most common reasons for EB1A denials or RFEs, requests for evidence, and how can one proactively address these potential issues in their petition?
Yep, yep. So the reason why I'm smiling on this question is because the EB1A is such a subjective experience, right? And what I mean by that is you could essentially have two identical profiles or one profile that's better than the other in the same field of work, and
Mhm,
the one that has the lesser profile, they get approved, and the one that has a better profile, they get an RFE, right? So what I mean to say is whether you get an RFE or a denial, really one thing comes down to luck. Second thing comes down to the USCIS officer, which I suppose is also tied to your luck, right? Because if you get a lenient USCIS officer, chances are you're not going to get an RFE. They're not going to give you a hard time. If you get an officer that's very hardlined, and I'm going to give some examples here, then you can have a very difficult time with your EB1A application, right? So I recently filed two applications back to back, both security engineers. They essentially satisfied the same criteria. They both have a CISSP certification. They're both doing review work for the Cloud Security Alliance, except one got approved and the other, with the better profile, got an RFE. So we got his RFE letter just last week, and the RFE letter said, "Hey, we believe you satisfy two of the criteria, right? But we don't believe you have a high salary." And we're sitting here thinking, I'm kind of thinking because I'm doing this comparison on the back end, and I'm like, the guy with the lesser profile earns less than $300,000, and he was able to satisfy the criteria. The guy that earns $320,000 wasn't able to satisfy this third criteria. Make it make sense, right? It doesn't. So we need to do a little bit more work in terms of researching the criteria for the salary piece and even the membership piece to prove to this USCIS officer that, hey, yes, you've acknowledged that he satisfies to the criteria, right? That he's reviewed the work of others, that his work has been critical, and you're dinging us on salary, innovation, and the membership piece, right?
mhm,
So I do feel like we're going to get his approval, right? Because I think it's a pretty straightforward RFE, but this is an extremely subjective experience. Is kind of what I'm trying to say. Where someone who made less satisfied the criteria, someone who's making more got an RFE on it, right? So it just comes down to your USCIS officer and how they look at it. Um,
mhm,
Another example that comes to mind is my product manager within the wireless network technology space. We got an RFE for him that we felt like was going to be extremely difficult to overcome, where the officer said the recommendation letters, I mean, we provided 10, maybe 11 recommendation letters. The officer said the recommendation letters you've provided are given no value in your application package because they do not have the address of the recommenders. And I'm thinking, like, and he literally pointed out the USCIS policy manual says that in order to qualify as a letter, you need the name, you need a phone number, and you need an address. And I'm like, I've done a couple dozen of these EB1A applications now, specifically for IT clients, and I've done them successfully. I've never had an officer tell us or challenge us on these letters and the fact that we didn't have an address on them, right?
mhm,
So, every officer is different. We tackled the RFE. Last week he got an approval, so all's well that ends well. But he was a very hard-lined officer. I think I also gave this example last week, but I had two clients in September of 2023, both data engineers. One was a data engineer in like the truest form, like a data scientist. One was a data engineer, but with more product management responsibilities. both got an RFE, both got denied. And one of them tells me, hey, instead of appealing this, what if we just literally took the same application package and we refiled it? And I said, sure, let's try it. They both got approved. Right. So like,
Okay.
that literally, like, it's like roulette, right? You don't know where you're gonna land, which officer you're gonna land with. I've had a client where he was only able to produce 4 recommendation letters total, right? I typically like to send 10 or 12. This guy could only produce 4, so only 4 people wrote about him. We kind of like we made an argument on 4 criteria. We knew the 4th one was really weak, so we were putting all of our eggs in one basket with these 3
Hmm.
criteria. Um, he got an approval, right? Like, no denial. He did get an RFE, but we overcame it. But, like, no denial, you know? So, like, it just really depends. I think, one thing you can make sure to do, and as I've learned over the year, is the most, when we see, the RFE reasons over and over again, let's take it from the criteria of criticality. One thing that I've learned to do is get out of the project level details, and try to explain why the project was critical for the organization, right? Not why the project was just critical in and of itself, but why was it critical for the organization, right? In the innovation criteria, how did it maybe influence the industry, right? Not how there were novel or innovative techniques introduced into the technology, but how is it innovating in the industry, right? How is it different than how things have been done previously? Um, I think for the salary piece, right, getting more granular, right? So if I have a software engineer that is focused on machine learning or artificial intelligence, I'm now comparing his salary or her salary to other AI ML engineers, not other software engineers, right? If they're focusing on, let's say, natural language generation, natural language processing systems, I'm comparing their salary to other NLP or NLG engineers, right? So getting much more granular on the salary piece, right? Um, so those are some of the learnings that I've seen over the last year, really, as it relates to RFEs and denials, and the other learning is just like it is luck as well, right? Like if you got luck on your side and you get an easy officer, chances are you'll probably get approved as long as you make a really good argument. You
Hmm.
could put the best argument forward, right? Like for one of my security engineers, we sent 1,300 pages of documentation. Got an RFE, right? So that is what it is. But
True.
yeah, yeah, those are some ways you can anticipate overcoming RFEs, though.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all luck for sure. So let's stay positive and manifest it, friends. It's all going to happen for your good. All right. And also, another thing is not to worry about RFEs because it's not a denial, it's just request for evidence. So, yes, you just have to do your bit, prove it, and you'll be on the track again. Right, Prashant? Nothing to worry about.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't take a case unless I know we've got at least 3 or 4 arguments we can make soundly, right? So,
Mm.
I'm not gonna take a client's money and be like, "Yeah, you're gonna satisfy these criteria," because that's a terrible customer experience, they're gonna be like, "Prashant, you told me I satisfy this, what's going on?"
Mhm.
It's only if I believe in it will I take it, right? And if we still get an RFE, we'll tackle it accordingly, but, if I don't believe in it, and if you don't have the criteria, I will send you with some homework, right? I'll send you with a roadmap in terms of what you can do based on my learnings from other clients. Like, hey, take the next 1 or 2 years to really enhance your profile, because at the end of the day, you're cutting out decades in GC processing time if you can get the EB1. So if you can discipline yourself for the next 12 to 24 months, you could have a real shot at this EB1 and save yourself some time.
Sure, for sure. And folks out there, as we delve deeper into our discussion, I just want to remind all of you who have joined us, all our viewers, that if you have any questions or if you would like to seek personal guidance from Attorney Prashant Dubey, you can even reach out to him directly and you can find his contact details on the screen. That is info@dubeylawoffice.com. Once again, I repeat, info@dubeylawoffice.com. Check him out and connect with him for sure. And now it's actually time for a short break. So stay tuned and we'll be back shortly to continue our conversation on building a profile to qualify for EB1A category. And that is as an IT professional. So stay with us. Don't go anywhere. On Immigration and Jobs Talk Show, this is Nipasa Pradhan.
Consultant seeking a new opportunity? We offer job placement services for US citizens, green cards, EADs, and visa holders. We also sponsor various work visas like H-1B, E3, TN, and green cards. 20 plus years of experience in the industry. Exceptional employee benefits. Highly rated by our employees. Global presence with 200 plus recruiters and direct clients. Connect with us. Call us in the number 408-335-6444 or mail us at nipa@higheritpeople.com or visit our website www.higheritpeople.com.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the break and, of course, the conversation we had before the break with none other than Attorney Prashant Dubey. And today we are discussing the ins and outs of qualifying for the EB1A category as an IT professional. And definitely before the break, we also touched upon the Rfes. And I think now it's time to go into our next question. So, Prashant, are you ready for the next question?
Let's do it.
All right. So, what are the most effective ways, to address and refute potential objections or challenges from USCIS, such as questions about the validity of achievements or the relevance of expertise to the US IT industry?
Yeah. So I think one of the best ways to do this is going out and obtaining an expert opinion letter, right? It's actually when we get an RFE and we feel like the RFE is challenging us on the criticality of somebody's work or the innovative nature of somebody's work, we always like to go out and get an expert opinion letter. So there are certain agencies that we work with. I get no benefit from that, but for purposes of working with the agencies, they communicate then with professors, industry experts, researchers who can basically provide it's almost like an 8 to 10 page expert opinion letter on why this person's projects were critical, how they're driving outcomes for their organization, and how they qualify for the EB1A criteria. So if you feel like, hey, you might have some weak points in your application, in your EB1A profile, getting an expert opinion letter is one way to always boost it, right? Um, I would also say making sure you have enough exhibits to back up your claims, right? So, for example, sometimes when individuals are reaching far back into their employment history in terms of project documentation, it's very difficult to get work products, right? Um, People don't have emails saved, they don't have architecture diagrams saved, they don't have code saved all the time. And so, sometimes all they're able to get is recommendation letters. And that's fine if it's one or two projects, but if every single project is only recommendation letters and it's just from peers, right? Um, that can be a problem. I always like to say, like, hey, if you've got 5 projects and we've got 10 recommendation letters for you, um, let's make sure, that 6 of those letters are maybe from peers, 4 of those letters are from managers, skip level managers, VP, director level folks, right? We need a good mix. It can't all be, your friends and family, so to speak. Um, and so, that's one way to make sure that, when you're talking through your projects, because it's important for 2 of the criteria, that you're able to produce work products. You're able to find recommenders who do hold significant titles. Um, I always also like to say, in terms of relevance of a person's expertise, always try to tie it to some sort of emerging trend or government interest, because that's how you're going to prove that you're going to be beneficial to the US and that your skill sets are really required. And what I find is my IT clients, again, they are working with cloud technologies. Some of them are, even double clicking further in machine learning and AI and natural language processing. You guys are doing such amazing things. Make sure you're always keeping an eye for how is this benefiting some sort of US government initiative? Or how is this tying into some sort of emerging trend? Like over the last year, generative AI has become the new hot thing, right? Large language models. Um, and I've had clients who are working on those initiatives, right? So it's so cutting edge. Make sure you are tying yourself to those types of projects, that are being talked about, that are becoming newsworthy in the industry, because you just help layer on additional exhibits to your EB1A profile.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for clearing that out for us as well, Prashant. And so friends out there, just take note. I hope you are following and not to worry, because even after this stream, this video is going to be there on our channel. So don't forget to subscribe to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. And we are discussing today about building a profile, to have a successful IT career, and how you can um, basically uh, catch the eye. Into your profile. So let's go ahead and take up a few more questions, Prashant. And if you could explain the role of the petitioner and the beneficiary in the EB1A process. What are the post-approval processes and requirements after obtaining an EB1A visa?
Yeah. So for the EB1A, the petitioner and the beneficiary are both the same, right? Since it's a self petition, there's no employer involved, right? The level of involvement from your employer will be to, help you obtain recommendation letters from, recommenders that you identify. Again, these can be peers, these can be managers, VPs, director level folks.
Right.
But it's not the employer that's filing your I-140 petition. It's in fact you as the client. And for a lot of people, that's very new, right? Because up until now, all of their petitions, their H-1B petitions, their EB-2, EB-3 petitions, they were all filed by their employer, right? They provided some documentation, but in the EB-1A process, because it's the self-petition, you own this process, you own signing off on it, right? And so that can be sometimes overwhelming for folks, but that's also where I always recommend, like, work with an immigration attorney. Doesn't have to be me, but work with an immigration attorney that has experience with EB1As and helping IT clients specifically, right? Because you
Right.
do have very specific requirements, and there's very specific, language that needs to be used, when building this profile. Now,
Mhm.
once you get the approval, and your priority date, let's say, is current, like it is for many of my clients, you're done with the hard part, right? Getting the EB1A approval is very, very difficult, right? So once you've done that, you're eligible to apply for the 45 application, which is what helps you obtain your green card. So,
Mhm.
the beauty of the EB1A is, let's say somebody, for example, one of my clients had a priority date in November 2017. He got his approval a couple of months ago, and we were able to port that 2017 priority date into the EB1A category, where EB1A is running in 2021 right now, which means he's current, right? If he's current, he can apply for his 45 applications and he can get his green card now, right? So that's the next step, is applying for the 45 applications. And so typically what
Yeah.
I do is I've already got my client's civil documents at that stage, right? So I have I-94 record, passport copies. I've got 797A notices of approvals for them and their spouse. I've got their birth certificates at that stage. I send them a questionnaire to complete for the 45 application, and, a short checklist of documents, right? So the questionnaire will have information about their address history, employment history, things that would be very, like, arduous and labor intensive to collect manually. So I just send them a questionnaire to automate it. But there's also things they need to go and obtain, like medicals, right? You need to do a medical examination in order to get your green card. So, I'll send them the link to the USCIS website where they can find a local civil surgeon. They'll set up the medical appointment. The civil surgeon in their office will fill out the associated form. They will provide it to them in a sealed envelope. Do not open that envelope. It even says it on the envelope. Do not open it, right? So you just mail that to me. I send it along with the application package. And once the application is with USCIS, you wait for your biometrics appointment notice, you do your fingerprinting, your biometrics, and it's a waiting game. There's no interview, right? I've never had an EB1A client get called in for an interview. You're just
Okay.
waiting for your green card to get processed. I've
Wow.
seen that happen as quickly as 2 months. I've also seen it happen, over 6 to 8 months. So where you fall in that timeline, you never really know. But nowadays, I am seeing EB1A GC applications, the 45 applications get processed fairly quickly. Where just a few years ago, like I did an EB1A for a dentist, and his 45 application took 1 year to get approved. But they're
Okay.
moving quicker.
Okay. Okay. So I think just that's another step closer to your green card. And friends, you would want to know. And for about the 485 application and the whole process and everything, I think we'll keep it for the next time for sure, Prashant. We will cover an episode, I hope, about that again. And well, let's move on to another question I got for you. Before we move on to the questions from the viewers, I know you are patiently waiting. Thank you for your, being with us. We will take them up and quickly, Prashant, if you could just go through this with us. Suppose an IT professional has made significant contributions to a critical national security project, and how could we balance the need for confidentiality with the requirement for public evidence and even recognition under EB1A criteria? So, what would you suggest in a situation like this?
Yeah. So, this is always, I do get this question because we've had clients that, do work on initiatives and projects that are confidential, highly confidential for the Army,
Mhm.
for example, for different departments of the military. And one thing to keep in mind is, between you and your attorney, everything stays confidential, right? Under the attorney-client confidentiality rules. The only other
Mhm.
person that's ever going to see those documents is a USCIS officer. And they sure will not go and release those documents into the public domain. It just doesn't happen, right? Those documents will only be seen by the attorney or a USCIS officer, right? Um, what I've seen examples where I've had a client do research for the Army, right?
Okay.
And we were able to provide like his research publication. We weren't able to provide, specifics in terms of like, what different technologies this was enabling for the Army. But we were able to provide, there's publicly available information that, when the Army wants research done, they issue sometimes almost like it's like an RFP, right? Um, and different research institutions can vie for the funding associated with that RFP. So that's one way to tie you to the project. And then we can also get a recommendation letter, right? So when it's highly sensitive information like that, there's different ways we can come at it. Recommendation letters being one of them. Work products that talk high level about what you've done, but don't really, reveal like sensitive details. And if they do reveal sensitive details and you're not comfortable sharing it, we can just redact that from the PDF files, and kind of black it out, right? So that way we can at least show, some portions of your contributions, but maybe an architecture diagram is highly sensitive and you don't want to share that. It's fine. We can redact that.
Okay. Thank you so much for your suggestion. And thank you, Prashant, for taking that up. And I think quickly, let's just move on without further ado to the questions from our viewers. So we have found the name of the first anonymous one we had. So let's have it on the screen. That is This one is from S. Kirtan on LinkedIn. Thank you for this session. Initial part of my career was in medicine or biology with publications and fellowships. I am currently working as an IT professional. Please let me know what are my chances given initial high achiever record and decently doing well currently in IT.
Yeah, I mean, it's a balance, right? So if you have publications and fellowships, right, to me, right off the bat, it seems like you can satisfy one of the criteria that states, have you been published in scholarly journals, right?
Mhm.
And if your publications have received citations, even better, right? Because then that shows influence in the industry. Your fellowships, depending on what type of fellowships they are, we can explore the fact that you have a membership um, in organizations that demand outstanding achievement of their individuals, right? Um, we can also discuss or talk through kind of, in your medicine biology background, maybe you were a researcher, maybe you worked in a lab, right? What types of clinical outcomes was your lab work, was your research work informing, right? That can talk about the criticality of your work. And then you now as an IT professional, maybe you're working for a pharmaceutical company, right? So maybe you're still delivering, patient and healthcare outcomes, but just on the technology side, right? We can talk through what that looks like through some of your project details. You might be able to satisfy the salary criteria. So I think you bring a very interesting perspective and profile to the EB1A. Reason being that you already have research and fellowships, and maybe even you've done reviews of conference papers, right? And if you haven't, maybe you've got contacts already in the industry from your previous life that you can make those connections and go out and do those, right? So I see multiple criteria here for you that you could
Mhm.
potentially satisfy. We would just need to unpack each one and the details related to each one.
Thank you so much, Prashant, and S. Kirthan also for writing to us. I hope you are pretty much clear right now. And so, if you have more questions to follow up, just keep them dropping, and you can directly even contact Prashant for sure. So, moving on, Prashant, I got this actually multiple questions from Vishnu, and he's saying computer science, multiple certifications. However, my achievements are largely industry specific and not widely recognized outside of my field. I have no Nobel Prizes, no published research as yet. I've developed innovative solutions that have significantly impacted my company's success and have been recognized as a subject matter expert by my peers. How can I build a strong profile to qualify for the EB1A category, um, given my lack of traditional extraordinary ability, credentials, and what specific evidence and supporting documentation would you recommend to demonstrate my extraordinary abilities and achievements in the IT field? Pretty long, but I hope you
Yeah,
could follow.
yeah. So in terms of his qualifications, right? My clients don't have a Nobel Prize. They none of them do, right? It's just not the arena in which they operate. But within IT, they have delivered good outcomes, right? So I've had an individual that worked for the city of Baltimore in their IT department that, when their public water system was hacked, um, and it got shut down and went down, he was brought in to bring that system back online, right? And for the city of Baltimore, their water system is the number one revenue generator, right? They couldn't even collect payments from residents, right? So, you know, if we can find a way to make an argument that your projects, that your contributions have been critical. You mentioned that, you know, you've introduced innovative solutions. What I'd be interested to know is, okay, how are you sharing those innovative solutions with the wider industry, right? How are you
A
influencing
little
the
bit more
industry?
about him. A little bit more about him is that I am an IT professional with over 10 years of experience in the field, and I'm seeking to apply for an EB-1A visa as an alien of extraordinary ability. My background includes a bachelor's degree in computer science and multiple certifications. That's how it went. So yes, I think the picture is a little clearer now, Prashant.
Yeah, yeah, no. The certifications, I mean, it depends on the certifications you have, right? If it's a CISSP, If it's a CFA level type of a certification that's extremely difficult to get, and there's only a limited number of people that even have them, then yes, we can obviously make an argument for that. But we would need to unpack exactly which certifications. Um, your achievements being industry specific, that's all you need. It needs to be industry specific, right? You can't go about influencing the entire United States. Nobody is a one-man army, right? So when I make an argument, like for example, I'm writing an EB1A brief right now for an individual that has worked specifically within the domain of natural language processing systems, right? Within software engineering and machine learning. And so my argument is that, within NLP itself, this is a person you want to have in the US because she has publications, she has patents, she's got an incredibly high salary. She's been, her work has been newsworthy, her work has been critical. Like we're hitting 5 to 6 different criteria for her, right? But within the domain of natural language processing, right? She might be a software engineer, but specifically within natural language processing. So we do like it to be industry specific, because again, there's no way to influence such a wide industry, right? Like we need to double click on exactly what you're focused on and what you're doing.
Right. Thank you so much, Prashant, for taking that up. And let's move on quickly to this next question. This is from Jazila. Jazila is asking, can IT professionals with a background in academia or research qualify for EB1A status based on their contributions to the IT field?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of the criteria, right, that we can satisfy. Um, it would need to be relevant. So, for example, if you did research on animals, right, and you did research publications on animals, but in the IT field, you're not working on outcomes that are, delivering for animals, then that's a problem, right? Because there's no connection. If your research was focused on pharmaceuticals and drug development and patient outcomes, and you're working for a healthcare company in the IT side, there's a relationship, right? So, we can leverage your academic research background, to say, hey, they satisfy this publication criteria, this reviewing journals and reviewing conference papers criteria, but they're also doing all of these amazing things in IT, right? If we can draw a thread between all of those different experiences you have and tell a cohesive story, that's really what the brief is we're telling a story. Then I see no reason why we can't use your experience, from a research or academic setting for the EB1A.
So that's a yes for Jazila. All the best, Jazila. Let's take this next one, which is a USCIS question. This is from Tarun. Hello. How does USCIS evaluate the impact of an IT professional's contributions to their field of EB1A eligibility?
Yeah, so I think it's important to think about this from the perspective of the criteria, right? So if you look at criticality, your projects just need to be critical for your organization, not necessarily the industry. If you're claiming innovation, that's where it needs to be contributing something to the industry, right? And by something, I mean, have you been invited to come talk about it? Was it newsworthy? Is it being published? Do you have a patent associated with it, right? To demonstrate that it is in fact innovative. When we make the argument on, are you beneficial to the US? That's another area where we want to talk about your contributions to the field, right? And the fact that it's contributing to emerging technologies or some US government interest. And that's why you would be important to the US and to obtain this EB1A. So I would say your contributions are very criteria specific, in terms of how we want to map them out. And then also for that other analysis, it's also important for proving that you're going to be beneficial to the US.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prashant. And I think we will wrap up our topic for today. I think 2 episodes we covered this. So before we end this topic, Prashant, if you have any advice or tips for all those EB1A applicants, before we close the topic for sure today.
Yeah. I would say be patient, with the process, right? Reason why I say that is because it's a marathon. It's not a race. Um, take the time to adequately build an EB1A profile. Don't half-ass it, for the lack of a better word. Like I have people come to me and they're like, I make $130,000 as a software engineer, and I'm going to claim the salary criteria. And I'm like, if you're working with me, we're not claiming the salary criteria, right? Like you need, like if you're in the state of California, I know you need at least 198,000, right? I'm not going to submit something that's going to upset a US CIS officer. So take the time, be patient, right? Develop your profile. If you don't already have it, develop to that, to the level of an EB1A already. Take the 12 to 24 months it takes to develop it. Be patient with it. Make the right connections. Don't burn bridges. If you're asking for recommendation letters from people, take them out to coffee, take them out to lunch, right? Be a human. And build the relationships. The people that I've seen, like my EB1A clients that have done this the best, are the ones that cultivated, maintained relationships over the last decade. They could go back to their manager that they worked with at Meta from 10 years ago and say, hey manager, can you write this recommendation letter for me? Or actually not write it, we write it, they just need to sign it. Can you sign off on this recommendation letter for me? And they say yes, right? It's that easy because they've developed the relationships, they've maintained those relationships, and that's so important because your recommendations are going to drive two of the criteria potentially. So be patient, take the time to build those relationships, and definitely think of it as a marathon and not a race at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Take those words of wisdom, friends, and thank you so much for joining us today. And it's a wrap for today's episode, on Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. A big thank you once again to our wonderful guest, Attorney Prashant Dubey, for sharing your expertise and insights with us, covering this topic today, especially making a very nice, attractive EB1A profile as an IT professional. So your knowledge has undoubtedly provided invaluable guidance to our viewers. So thank you so much, Prashant. I hope to see you again in the coming week.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. Have a good one.
Have a good day ahead. Bye bye. And happy weekend for sure. All right. So, friends, thank you so much for joining. All you viewers out there, wherever you joined us from, whether on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter, thank you so much. And remember, you can um, keep posting your comments, your questions. If you have any further questions on topics you'd like us to cover in the future episodes as well, please feel free to reach out to us. And my details are also on the screen if you are looking for project placements or green cards, EADs. Just connect with us. You can call me on the number 408-335-6444 or just email me in this address that is at nipa@higheritpeople.com. And don't also forget to visit our website www.higheritpeople.com. And that's it. Until next time, then stay informed and take care and keep chasing your dreams. This is Nipasa Pradhan signing off from Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. Bye bye.
Consultant seeking a new opportunity? We offer job placement services for US citizens, green cards, EADs, and visa holders. We also sponsor various work visas like H-1B, E-3, TN, and green cards. 20 plus years of experience in the industry. Exceptional employee benefits. Highly rated by our employees. Global presence with 200 plus recruiters and direct clients. Connect with us. Call us in the number 408-335-6444 or mail us at nipa@higheritpeople.com or visit our website www.higheritpeople.com.